All right, hello. Geometry, starting a new unit, going to be looking at conditional statements and sort of like proofs. These are really important topics in math because you have to be able to prove why you think certain things, or you have to be able to prove that you know this to be true. And so these are one of the ways that we can do that. So if we look at this conditional statement, what that means is that a conditional statement is basically like a statement. Like right here, we have guitar players are musicians. But we like to turn this into if, then statements. So if corresponds to our hypothesis, and then the then corresponds to the conclusion. So we could change this statement, guitar players are musicians, into a if you are a guitar player, then you are a musician. Your hypothesis is if you are a guitar player, your conclusion is then you are a musician. Now we can also deal with this idea called the converse. And so the converse is when you flip-flop your hypothesis and your conclusion. So you exchange the hypothesis and the conclusion. So if I were to take my statement, if you are a guitar player, then you are a musician, and I flip-flop it, if you are a musician, then you are a guitar player. So now note that if we think about that, that's not always true, okay? So the conditional and the converse are not always both true. So again, if I look at the converse, if you are a musician, then you are a guitar player. What about if I was a singer? What about if I was a drummer? What about, that's not how you spell drum. What if I played not the guitar, but I played the bass? So there are other ways to be a musician that's not just a guitar player. So in this case, I would say that if you are a guitar player, then you are a musician. That's true. However, if you are a musician, then you are a guitar player. That's not necessarily true. And so when they are both true, then you have a biconditional statement, a statement that contains the phrase if and only if. So you might say something like, if they're both true, then you have a biconditional statement, which is a statement that contains the phrase if and only if. So so that would be like, I am a musician if and only if I play the guitar. Or I am a guitar player if and only if I am a musician. So again, using this statement if and only if is something else that we're going to have to see. And again, that kind of means this isn't true unless the next thing is true as well. So the contrapositive, so again, we kind of have a lot of vocab in this. So again, make sure that you are writing these down and understanding the differences between the conditional, the converse, the biconditional, and the contrapositive. So to do this, you write the converse, and then you negate or you say the opposite of both the hypothesis and the conclusion. So our converse that we found was, if you are a musician, then you are a guitar player. The contrapositive is, if you are not a musician, then you are not a guitar player. And again, where does this come from? This comes from negating our hypothesis and our conclusion. So step 1 is converse, write the converse. Step 2 is negate or do the opposite of hypothesis and conclusion. To write the inverse of a conditional statement, negate both the hypothesis and the conclusion. So this is where we take our original. So again, the inverse is just taking our original conditional statement and negating them both. So I started with, if you are a guitar player, then you are a musician. So the inverse would just be, if you are not a guitar player, then you are not a musician. So I took my original statement and just made both the hypothesis and conclusion negative. So I guess if we kind of try to fill in this little graph here, I like to think about it. All right, my conditional is my if-then statement. And that's like what we kind of start from. Then if we want to find the converse, and then again it goes, our if-then statement goes hypothesis and then conclusion. My converse goes, it's an if-then. They all are going to be. But I'm going to go conclusion first, and then my hypothesis. My inverse, I'm going to take my conditional statement, and I'm just going to make it not. So again, it's still an if-then statement, but I'm going to have my not hypothesis or my negative hypothesis, and then my negative or my not conclusion. And again, the contrapositive is when you take your converse and then you make them both negative. So again, it's still an if-then, but it's going to be not conclusion, not hypothesis. So they're all related to each other, and everything relates back to the original conditional statement. That's what I'm basing everything off of, was the original conditional statement.